All right, so we spent last week talking about quadrilaterals, and we talked about parallelograms. So just a reminder, I know this one looks better than my notes from last time, because I learned a little bit since then. So we have quadrilaterals, which are just four-sided polygons. That's all you have to know, is that there's four sides. That's it. If it has four sides, it's a quadrilateral. So we have different categories for quadrilaterals. We have parallelograms, and we have trapezoids. So we already talked about parallelograms last week. We talked about how a parallelogram has to have two sets of parallel sides. That's all. As long as it has two sets of parallel sides, you're good to go. So we have three different shapes that are also parallelograms. So remember, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral, and so that means that rectangles, squares, and rhombuses are all parallelograms, but they're also all quadrilaterals. So we're going to start off with rectangles. You guys learned this one last week. In order for it to be a rectangle, there are two characteristics, or you could call them attributes, that make it a rectangle. So if it has two sets of parallel lines, that means that this line and this line are parallel. They'll never touch. And this line and this line are parallel. They'll never touch. So we have opposite sides. This is one set of parallel lines, and this is set number two of parallel lines. So two sets of parallel lines. Even though there's four lines, each set of two is one set. So we have one set of parallel lines, two sets of parallel lines. It also has to have four right angles. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So a rectangle has two sets of parallel lines and four right angles. A square is very similar to a rectangle, except we have one added attribute. It has to have equal sides. All four sides have to be the same length. So we have four right angles, we have four sides that are all the same length, and we have two sets of parallel lines. These lines are parallel, they'll never touch, and these lines are parallel, they'll never touch. So that makes a square. A rhombus is like a square and a rectangle, except it's missing four right angles. It doesn't have to have right angles. It can look like kind of like a kite, as long as these sides are all equal, and as long as these sides are parallel and these sides are parallel. Two sets of parallel lines, because a rhombus is a parallelogram. So if it has two sets of parallel lines and equal sides, that makes it a rhombus. So we have a rhombus, a square, and a rectangle that are all parallelograms, which have two sets of parallel lines. Parallelograms are quadrilaterals. So all three of these are quadrilaterals. All three of these are parallelograms. A square is a rectangle because it has two sets of parallel lines and it has four right angles. So even though the square is, even though a rectangle isn't always a square is always a rectangle. So this shape right here is technically a rectangle. It is also a rhombus because it has two sets of parallel lines and all the lines are equal. So then it switches over to our other side that's not parallelograms, the trapezoid. So what distinguishes these two is that one has one set of parallel lines and one has two sets of parallel lines. So for this one, we are going to, looks like I don't have another color of pen besides red and blue and black. So I guess we'll keep it blue. Okay, so a trapezoid has one set of parallel lines. So I can draw two parallel lines, and I know this is a quadrilateral, so it has to have four sides. So as long as I make four sides, it's a trapezoid. I make my one set of parallel lines and connect the other ones, and I have a trapezoid. I think you guys would probably recognize this one the best. Two sets of parallel lines, we connect the sides, and it's a trapezoid. So there's lots of different ways a trapezoid can look, but as long as you have your two sets of parallel lines, wherever you connect those other two, as long as they're not parallel, it's a trapezoid. So you are going to, I believe, do the GIM kit today, and then you'll do some more practicing on IXL the following day, and then we're going to move on from this topic. So hopefully it's not too hard. It's a lot to remember, but we already knew what a rectangle and a square was, so we aren't adding much new. So get started on your next task, and I hope that this is helpful. Remember, you can always pause this video and write it down to help you even more.